in the trade, not just the avocados, a lot of other stuff. That too is a sign of what has changed, what are the doors that have opened. But then when one looks at a domain which many of you would be directly connected to, when I look at the mobility and migration agreement, when I look at the mutual recognition agreements that I have, when we speak about the MATES program, when I hear about UQ and IIT Delhi having this strong relationship. In fact, to me, a lot of this are these are possibilities foretold in Chancellor Varghese report a decade ago, which we actually are today realizing in great measure. So there is an immense possibility there. And I will come back to this aspect later, but I was particularly pleased that we've just had the visit of our Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, because I do believe that education and research will play a disproportionate role in the sort of knowledge economy and the era of AI into which we are now entering. In my own more orthodox domain, I think there are many other platforms on which we work. It's natural for big countries, for any countries for that matter, to deal with each other in the United Nations, because we are both Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific countries. In the East Asia Summit, we are members of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. So the short point is actually things are coming together. The structures are there, the platforms are there, the right people are meeting with the right occasion, right regularity, things are happening. And on the ground, this is not airy-fairy things. These are very practical things which eventually get translated into numbers, whether they are trade numbers, whether they are education numbers, whether they are research projects, whether there's tourism, or whether it is our joint effort at making the Indo-Pacific safer for all of us. And I would say particularly, the manner in which our defense collaboration has grown in the last decade has been really very impressive. There are a number of occasions where our military work together very closely, and the extent today of the cooperation is something we couldn't have even imagined 5-10 years ago. So if I were to take it on from there, that if we are to work together, if we are to learn from each other, what would be some key areas? And to my mind, I think there are 3 or 4 which stand out. One, obviously, is our economic complementarity. Given the nature of our economies, your economic activities and strengths in Australia will fit in many ways to what would be the requirement of an India that would be growing at 7 to 8% or more for decades to come. So what we have seen, to my mind, I think we are today your 4th largest trade partner, but I can see really this expand both in terms of volume as well as go up in ranking. And I sincerely believe that how we increase the economic cooperation, encourage more businesses, and I will myself in this visit be meeting the business community to push that particular message. A second, a derivative of that is actually in some ways the demographic fit. That we are moving to an era where it is important to get the demographic demand and supply right. And particularly because, a lot of the key economic activities are actually going to be research and technology driven. This will acquire a degree of importance, even greater importance than it does today. But if I could look at some other aspects, tourism, for example, that I understand, I think Queensland is host to 5 natural heritage sites. Now, India today is making a big push in terms of tourism. Considering our potential, we believe that tourism, particularly international tourism, still has a lot of headroom to grow. There are, collaborations here that are possible. Sports has been mentioned. We look with great interest towards the 2032 Olympics. We ourselves have our aspirations towards 2036. Cricket is always there for us to talk about. And I'm particularly conscious that this is the state of Allen border. So when we speak about the border Gavaskar Trophy, I think it's particularly relevant. So I want to give you that message that our relationship, in a way, has just begun. That there are immense possibilities, that we have today. Treat these 10 years as a foundation. This is a foundation which all of you and all of us together have to build on. We see in every domain, there are, honestly, about the only thing we now argue about in a divergent way is probably cricket. But in almost every other area, we actually today see strong complementarities and strong convergence. Now, having said that, I know many of you all follow developments back at home with a great deal of interest. So I thought I could spend a little time talking about that as well. You all know we had our elections this summer, and the third term of the Modi government is now approaching about 150 days. Because it is the third term, and I guess in a way because it is Modi, we've actually hit the ground running. If you look at the last 150 days, it's been a very, I would say, almost a frantic pace at which decisions, initiatives, programs have happened in the country, many of them with a far-reaching implication. If I were to pick 2 or 3 sort of big goals, I would say right now, one of them certainly would be how to create, how to keep up the pace of growth, but make it much more employment driven. How to today become competitive in an overall sense. And how do we board that manufacturing bus that we missed in the past and today board it in a way in which we are not left behind in terms of the global technology progress. I think to me, these would be some of the key concerns, not the only concerns. I would say equally, especially after all the uncertainties that we saw during the COVID period today, health security and food security would be very important. So again, many of the decisions that we have taken relate very directly to those. But the result of this set of priorities that I have laid out actually has been a decision to take forward 12 industrial zones across the country, to double down on infrastructure building, especially connecting it to these industrial zones, and to prepare the human resources which are necessary for that manufacturing capability to grow and for those technology strengths to advance. So if you recall really the budget speech of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, a lot of it was really about growing more skills institutions, increasing the number of tertiary education centers, improving the quality of schools, encouraging internships in a greater way, asking businesses to become partners of this enterprise. So this today is in a sense, I would say, the key priorities of the third term of the Modi government. Now, in the last 10 years, we believe we have made very significant progress. And I would attribute the progress to the fact that we have embarked on a series of efforts which feed into each other, making it much easier to do business in the country, improving the ease of living, which is reducing the bureaucratic load on the average citizen, radically improving the infrastructure through a program called Gati Shakti, which in fact has a very strong application of multiple kinds of technologies. Putting in place what has been a remarkably effective digital public infrastructure, and I'd like to share some thoughts with you about that. Improving the quality of governance overall, and in my view, actually ensuring the political stability which allows for decisions taken to be implemented in full and for new decisions to build on earlier ones. Now, I put this to you in terms of a description, but often I'm in situations where I have 5 minutes to impress somebody from abroad who wants to know, okay, what's happening in India. So I want to give you that 5-minute description. Actually, it's not even 5 minutes, probably 1 minute. I tell people, please understand today's India. Today's India, if I were to pick 5 numbers, is building 28 kilometers of highway every day. It's building 12 to 14 kilometers of railway track every day, quite apart from the Vande Bharat trains which have been introduced, which I would invite you to ride on next time any of you are in India. Which had 6 cities with metros a decade ago, which has 21 today, and we are planning an additional 39 to take. Which has on average built 7 to 8 new airports every year for the last decade. A decade ago we had 75 airports, today we are close to 150. Which, by the way, as a result of all of this, has about 1,000 planes on order from the international aviation industry, which has actually doubled down on its education system. Now, this gives you a kind of a snapshot of the changes underway. Now, it's not my contention that those are adequate. On the contrary, aspirational India today demands that, these are seen in many ways today as basic requirements. So, we are addressing a lot of legacy needs, but certainly we hope that the expectations of society actually lead to higher performance and higher delivery in this regard. Now, this is one part of the change which has happened. The other part of the change is probably less visible to many of us. Less visible because many of us come from middle class families, mostly urban. So we don't directly always experience, and I'm sure there may be some exceptions here. We don't always directly experience how the digital public infrastructure actually has delivered, particularly outside urban areas, including in urban areas, but also to those who are, I would say, of a lower income and who are socio-economically more vulnerable. And again, I want to give you some ideas of numbers. We have a program to build houses to those whose income levels are low. In the last 10 years, 35 million houses have been built and delivered, which means about, roughly given Indian family size, which means about 160 million people are living in houses today which they did not have a decade ago. Let's look at health. Some of you may have heard of a scheme called Ayushman Bharat. Now, the idea is to provide free or subsidized health care for those who are deserving. The users of this today number 530 million, which is roughly, the numbers, about 40% of the total population. Also that there are a lot of people who depend on government rations, on public food distribution for their nutrition. Now, during the COVID period, we took a decision that we would expand the nutritional support, because at that time a lot of people, in fact, had a loss of employment or income. Today, we give direct food support to 815 million people, which is almost 2/3 of the country. Water, which in many, developed societies would be taken for granted, but again, those of you who remember some of the circumstances in some parts of India know it's been a challenge. That actually roughly about little more than 1/3 of the country, 500 million people, have been covered by what is called the Jal Jeevan Mission. And even if you look in terms of entrepreneurship, the small loans that are given out, and a disproportionate number of these are actually given out to women. In the last decade, close to about 350 million loans have been given out. So I put this to you, that this is not just a society, which is changing at a sort of a visible level in the urban areas, in those places where you would naturally go to when you go to India. But if you go even to remote areas, if you go out of big cities, if you travel around the country today, it really hits you, the extent of change. And I must tell you, as a person who lives in India, when I go to Gujarat, where I'm elected, and I travel around in the district, which is a predominantly tribal district that I have a certain responsibility for, I can actually see these things happening on the ground. And perhaps the most startling change is actually the UPI, the cashless transaction. We just had last week the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, and Prime Minister Modi was explaining to him how it works. And we encouraged him when he went to Mumbai to use one of our phones to do a transaction himself. I think he bought a Ganapati idol. But when you tell people that the cashless transactions today in India, the UPI transactions number 12 to 13 billion a month. And the American, I'm giving you a comparative figure. The US does 4 billion a year, 4 or 5 billion a year. So you have to understand today how deeply actually the digital medium has been embraced in Indian society. So when we speak today about how education will change things, how good governance can make a difference, what are the aspirations of a society, a deeply digital people have the ability today to make that kind of big jump, which we expect to see happen in the coming decade. So I want to, share with you that today's India is very clearly driven by technology, by a very willing, I would say almost a passionate embrace of its possibilities. Not just by researchers and academics and, by you can say big businesses. It has actually been embraced by the people. That if street vendors start using, QR codes for payments, something has changed. Something big has changed. And to my mind, the possibilities there for the country's progress are enormous. Now, while we speak of technology, I think you would have also heard Prime Minister Modi's emphasis that technology and tradition should go hand in hand. We are a civilizational state. We have a long history, culture, tradition, heritage. It's important that this is nurtured because at the end of the day, it's basic to our identity. And again, in an era of globalization, it cannot be assumed that this is self-sustaining. So here too, I would say efforts are being made. I mean, at a local level, this initiative of what is called One District, One Product, to encourage every local area to produce and market and take pride in what they have historically been, their product or their skill or their craft. We had another initiative called Vishwakarma, which is to actually give support to the crafts people of India, because in the modern era, often the crafts tend to disappear. They are overwhelmed by industrial scale production. Or the decision we just took a few weeks ago of promoting giving more languages the status of classical languages and promoting their teaching and their spread. So for us, it's important that we foster technology, we take the country forward using all the tools and opportunities it provides, but at the same time, we also nurture our traditions, we maintain our culture, and we keep, in a sense, the balance between the two. Now, having said that, I want to come back really to the foreign policy domain. I think perhaps it was the High Commissioner who mentioned that for us, foreign policy is it's not only a business of interacting with other countries. India will grow, India is growing, but India wants to grow with the world. When we look at the world, we see opportunities. We are optimistic. There may be problems, but overall, we think the world has goodwill, the world has a desire to work with India. We see a sentiment overall in the world for India to succeed, and it's important we harness that sentiment. So a lot of what we do with the world today is really to explore opportunities with the world. Education and research is one example of that. Another, and again this is a very interesting phenomenon which is gathering steam in India. There are an estimated 1,800 to 2,000 global capability centers which have been set up by foreign companies in India, where people, in a sense, are part of a global workforce but located in India. And there is, in fact, I think a report, a Deloitte report, if my memory serves me right, which says that their businesses they generate today is in excess of $150 billion. And most of that is actually exports. I mentioned that to you because it's very clear that the world is moving towards a global workforce. In fact, much of the discussions today we have in foreign policy are about arrangements, understandings about how to create, manage, and move a global workforce to everybody's satisfaction. There are inevitably social sensitivities. I mean, that is something we need to recognize as well. But at the end of the day, we do believe that, the image today of Indians abroad, the image of being well educated, of being, so personally responsible, of the work ethic, the family-centric nature of our lives. I think the combination of all of this today makes us very, very attractive in the global workplace. And I think it's important that that brand is developed, that those skills are nurtured, that we actually use diplomacy as a way of growing the global workplace to mutual satisfaction. And again, I emphasize that this era, this era of AI, of electric mobility, of chips, this will require a global workforce. I mean, the countries where there are technologies, the countries where there are demands are not the countries where there are talents and skills. Somewhere this needs to be triangulated and made much more effective, and I think there's a growing realization of that requirement. So let me finally end again with our own relationship. I of course tomorrow after a day here I go on to Canberra and then to Sydney. Part of my mission here is obviously to deepen our bilateral relationship, the political side, the defense and security side, the business side. I will be visiting disaster response warehouse here because again, when we speak of working together and doing things for the world, those are the kind of things today which India and Australia do. I mean, very recently there was a horrendous mudslide in Papua New Guinea. And one of the reasons we could deliver Indian material relief assistance was because the Australians helped to deliver it to Papua New Guinea. Now, this wouldn't have happened. People wouldn't have even thought of it in an earlier era. So, how do we today keep the region safer, better? How do we work for global good? May sound like nice words. Often these are real decisions which require ground activities. So a lot of my efforts would be to keep all of that going. But once again, I do want to say, for me, it's a moment of great satisfaction that I'm here to formally inaugurate a new consulate general in a country where I would surely rank today among our foremost friends. So once again, thank you all. You've taken the trouble to come on a Sunday evening. I truly appreciate that. And I look forward, Chancellor, particularly to the education and the research side of our relationship. I'm very confident that it will grow. Thank you again.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, and on behalf of everybody in the audience, we